Okay, so we are recording it. My name is Monica Stampley, and I am with Families Helping Families Region 7. I'm the Early Steps Community Outreach Specialist and also the Bureau of Family Health, Families Helping Family Project Community Resource Specialist. I know that was a lot. But I'm here at Families Helping Families Region 7, and today we have Donisa Walker, who is the Executive Director for Learning RX of Shreveport, and she's going to present understanding how the brain works to make learning easier. So also, we are going to use the chat function today. So if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat. She is going to have a period of time after the session here to answer questions. So if you don't mind, just go ahead and put those questions that you may have throughout the presentation, put those in the chat, and then we'll get to those in the question and answer portion of the presentation. So I'll go ahead and turn it over. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be able to present to you and help you to understand how understanding the brain will make learning easier. My goal is that we can leave today with the ability for our children and ourselves to understand that learning should be fun, and it's something that we can do to make learning fun. So we want that to be that things can be fun. Just a little bit about Learning RX. Learning RX does brain training one-on-one. We are associated with learningrx.com, about 120,000 brains trained, and we work on the 7 core cognitive skills that we're going to be talking about. We work from ages 4 to, well, whatever age up. 94 is the oldest client we've had locally, but there are older clients that have attended across the nation. Our average IQ boost is 21 points within 6 months, and there are over 20 plus research studies that are completed or ongoing peer-reviewed research showing that Learning RX brain training does make a significant difference. And that's my passion, is that we can take struggling learners of all ages and those who just want to refine their brain and make it better, and we can take that and make everyone have a stronger brain. So the top 3 reasons why cognitive testing is the first step, which is where we start to unlocking the brain power, is 1, it eliminates guesswork. A lot of times we don't know what is going on. We don't know the exact cause that's causing a learning or reading or a performance struggle, even mathematically. And so the first reason that we want to do cognitive testing is to unlock the brain power and eliminate that guesswork. We want to also stop wasting money, time, and effort. The most sacred resource we have for our children is time, because it's the one thing we cannot get back. And when we put a lot of effort into wrong treatment choices, our children get frustrated, we get frustrated, and so that's kind of what happens. So we want to make sure that we're using their time valuably, and that the other reason is we want to always have a baseline measurement of our mental struggles and weaknesses. So this, I think every single human being should have a baseline, because we never know what's going to happen in life. And having the baseline actually helps us to know where our strengths, weaknesses are, and what we can do about it. But also, if something were to happen in our future, as it does as we age, we know where we initially were in this. So I suggest every parent take advantage of the cognitive testing, because it is so beneficial. So what are the causes to learning difficulties? 80% of learning difficulties come from a weakness in cognitive skills. Only 10% of that actually comes from poor instruction, 5% from sensory defects, and 5% from motivation. But most of the time, we look at children and people who are struggling and we think, well, this is, because they have a bad teacher, or this is because they have this, sensory issue, or they're just not motivated. They just don't want to. But the reality is, most of the time, it is a cognitive weakness, and it results in poor self-esteem, academic problems, and reduced life growth. So what are these cognitive skills that we're talking about? They're the underlying thinking skills we use every single day to perform all of our thinking processes. And we're going to go through each one, what they mean, and show you examples of what they're like, some exercises you can do to build these at home, and then also talk about what we do and how we can assist you also. So just an overview of those skills: long-term memory, short-term memory, visual processing, auditory processing, logic and reasoning, processing speed, and word attack. So we're going to dive into each one of those individually, but we're going to first look here on how we learn. This is the model of processing information, and these are the core skills we just talked about and are going to be talking about today. So attention is a primary skill that we hear a lot about through ADHD, and we say there's a weakness here. But attention is really an interruption to the automatic process. So when you have an attention interruption, it usually is affecting this automatic process, and it can affect with working memory, where you can't multitask or remember multi-step directions. It can affect your processing speed, where you're not thinking quick enough. People are talking too fast, you're moving too fast, the teacher's moving too fast, those types of things. When automatic processors are working as they should be, then the input comes in and you come to a decision tree. If the information is known, then you can just spit out the answer. If the information is not known and it's new, then you have to problem solve. So you come up here to your problem solving skill and you say, I need to think this through, problem solve it, decide what to do with it later. I need to read it, bring it out of my long-term memory and be able to use it. And then I can output the information so that it is linked effectively in that manner. So how does this look? Well, the reality is there is no singular cognitive skill that functions by itself. So you have to have multiple skills to do any one thing. And this is just an example that a jigsaw puzzle uses your visual processor, but it's not the only skill that it's, that it uses. The word math problems, you have to have, multiple things, and comprehension and planning are these upper sides of your underlying skills and activities. So you cannot get to reading comprehension, you cannot get to planning and organizing if these core cognitive skills are deficient. And that goes in every facet of life, from art to football, basketball, card games, memory, task, anything that you do in your day-to-day requires your cognitive skill efficiency to work as it should be working, okay? So what is the test about? Let's dive into that for just a minute. The test that we do, we have a couple of different options here. We do the Gibson test, which is a digital assessment or in person, and we have the Woodcock-Johnson. The Gibson test is one that takes about 35 minutes, can be taken in the privacy of your home via a computer, and it can tell us where your skills are, and you get a thorough test report. The Woodcock-Johnson is also a very thorough report, probably more in-depth. It has 20 different subtests. And in that one, you actually can look at all of your weak cognitive skills, not only where the percentile rank is, but what is the functional impact. And you can look at it in a graphical manner so you can see how far behind or ahead that you are. You can look at how the radar graph, how your brain is leaning in one direction or the other. And you can look at a graph that shows your pre and post percentile scores. And why we do that is to identify which of these skills is weak and which is strong, so that we can address that and make us the most efficient learner. Remember, it's not about being a poor learner or a great learner, it's being the best efficient learner that you can. So as we look at these cognitive skills today, we're going to talk about what they are and how they are affected, okay? So the processing speed is thinking quickly while processing information, and it's necessary for quick thinking and attention and focus, okay? Your long-term memory, your visual processing, all of these skills come together and work together so that you can become more efficient in your learning process. Let's dive into each one of them individually, okay? Because it's kind of too much to take them all in at just with one screenshot, okay? When we look at the weak skills and how they affect us, processing speed for you to understand is sort of like a computer, maybe our iPhones, if we compare that. So when a weak processing speed exists, it's sort of like your computer not working, and where it just is sitting there spinning and it's not getting the information to you that it needs to in a good time frame. Okay. When you have processing speed, it affects pretty much all of your other skills that you have. It can affect how your long-term memory happens, how your short-term memory happens, and how you process everything else. So this is a critical skill, and it is one that slows down as we age. So our peak for our processing speed is usually around 25 to 30 years old. And after that, it starts slowing down. So it's something that we do need to take into account, and we need to work on this to build the skill up throughout our lifetime. So brain training needs to happen throughout our lifetime. Our long-term memory is where we are learning to put things in memory. And one of the weak skills, noticing the weak skill here, would be when you're having to have repeated reteaching. So if you're having to hire a tutor, comparing that to not having enough memory on your computer at home. You're having to repeat a lot of things, and re-instruct a lot. When they come home from school, they don't remember what the teacher said, and you're re-instructing. The short-term memory means that you're giving them repeated instructions and lots of forgetfulness. A lot of times for this one, I will say you're the sticky note queen. So if you're the sticky note queen of the world, you might be struggling with some short-term memory issues. If you feel like you're a broken record with your child, like you tell them something and you tell them over and over again, and it's the same thing every single day, over and over, it might be because they have a weak short-term or working memory, okay? Here, when they have weak auditory skills, this is generally when they have trouble with reading. Sometimes, however, it can also affect our ability to hear and to process language, because just because your ear works doesn't mean that your brain always hears the way that it should be hearing. In weak logic skills, this primarily affects mathematical skills, but it also affects us inferencing and reading comprehension when we read between the lines. And this can be very problematic to kiddos who struggle with the gray areas. A lot of kids who struggle with autism have a weakness in this logic and reasoning area. They're very gray, very black and white, and they don't understand a lot of gray areas. They like things to be very linear, and they do not like a lot of variation in schedule without anticipation of that. The weak visual processing means you struggle with comprehension, possibly math also, because of the struggle means that you don't have that visual spatial sketch pad, which helps you create the movie in your mind's eye so that you can keep up with the information, right? So if you have a notepad and you want to take a notepad and take out some notes, I will make this PowerPoint available also, because there is a lot of information. So I will get this to Families Helping Families, and they can give this out to you, because there is quite a few of information and games and activities that you can implement at your home that will help. So let's start first with talking about memory. The long-term memory skills. This is recalling facts and events, and this is good for strong test taking. The working memory holds on to information long enough to use it, and it's required for following instructions. So we assess that both visually and auditorily here on the tests that we give. One of the ways that you can build long-term memory exercises is building a story. We went on a vacation with my staff, and that was kind of one of the fun things, driving all the way to Colorado and back. We played that. I went on a bear hunt, and I took with me. And so you can play games like that. You can build on a story, which is you have to say something for the last person. So if the first person said apple, then you might have to start with the E and say elephant. So you can build a story that way and tell the story. You can do the I went on a bear hunt or vacation and I took with me, and do your alphabet. You can just do listing activities where you're just going through, let's give a category such as fruit. And let's go through and let's list the alphabet. Let's start with all the fruits. So we've got apple, banana, and you go through coconuts and you list A, B, C, D in a certain category, okay? Some games that you can purchase that have this already in the ability for you to do that. One is Scattergories, excuse the typo because I obviously missed the R there. Scattergories is a good one, but there is also a card game that Scattergories, and I really love the card game. It seems to be more effective for me. The Memory Match is also another one, and these are available easily at the dollar store. And then one of my very favorites is Tribond. I did notice recently that that's gotten quite expensive. It's no longer in print, so you might want to find that one at a store like Thrifty Peanut locally, or you may want to go to like eBay or something if you want to do that. What does it do? It's basically 3 items that you're trying to find a connection. So if I said oak, cypress, and fir, then you could say those are all trees. So it's basically finding categories to put those things together, where Scattergories is actually doing the opposite. Another game that's not mentioned here that I do think is very, very good is called 5-Second Rule. I do mention that later on in the processing speed because it primarily works on processing speed, but it is also reliant on long-term memory. So if you want to target 2 skills, that is one I definitely suggest for targeting 2 skills. Okay. All right. Give you a second for your brain to dump and catch up. And while we do that, I'm going to express how important it is for us to do something called brain dumping. Brain dumping is when you get a lot of information and you need to do something with that information. So you just got a lot of information and you got to think about how to implement that information. So that could be a close your eyes, dump that information down. It could be note taking, but the point is that you do take the time to do a brain dump. Okay. For short-term memory, the working memory exercises that we do are a lot of fun. A fun one with this one is a stopwatch game where you are doing a timed recall. So this is just to give you an example, list all the names of fruit that starts with P. So it's short-term and working memory is pulling from your long-term memory, but to floss it, you actually need to refine that category and make it a little more difficult. So it's easier to do something like name ice cream flavors and colors and football teams than it is for you to name something that is specific in that area. All right, let's talk about our attention cluster and composite IQ. So the attention cluster and composite IQ gives on the test a general overall score of sustained and selective attention, as well as your divided attention. And it gives you a composite IQ of your cognitive intelligence called the general intellectual ability using standard scores. So we look at how attention is being affected, what areas are being affected. And when we look at those, these are what those mean. So sustained attention is an ability for you to keep that attention at a steady pace. And we're going to do an activity here in just a minute to show you how this works. Selective attention is a deficit that's obviously evident in autism. It is also evident in a lot of children who have executive function disorder or ADHD, okay? Divided attention also relies on working memory. And this activity we're going to do by alternating between reading, colors, and words. And I will show you the activity in just a minute. Altogether, these skills interacting together are our executive function, and that affects our attention and is a part of why many, many students struggle with focus, and many students who do have autism and ADHD struggle in this area. Think of executive function as kind of the CEO or the person who's in charge of the brain, and how quickly and efficiently all those cognitive skills work together is the main job of the CEO. So if you think of it in terms of an old saying that I say is when the cat's away, the mice will play. Well, when the executive function is not functioning as it should, then your cognitive skills don't function at the best efficiency that they need to function in. Okay, so let's try the activity. This version here on the left is a version for a younger child. And it can be fun and challenging. And then we have this one for an older adult. So it'll kind of give you a window of trial of each. So if we were working on sustained attention, we would be doing something as simple as just calling out the color of the ant heads here. Okay, so we have blue, red, yellow, blue, green, blue, red, calling all the way through. That would be sustained attention. For selective attention, it would be ignoring the color and coming and calling out the way that the eyes are looking. So this one would be left, up, down, left, up, right, down. So that would be selective attention because you're having to pay attention to something different than the obvious thing, which is the color. The third one would be divided attention. And in divided attention exercises, we will be looking at calling out the color of this little blue head here and the eye direction on this one. So it would look like blue up, yellow left, green right, red. And you would continue through the pattern. Okay, so that would be for a younger child, probably to, upper elementary school here. This would be an older child. We do this even with the young ones in center because we're working on this one. It's a little bit harder once they're past that reading age because your tendency in your brain is to want to read what the word says. So sustained attention is simply just doing that, okay? Black, red, green, yellow, blue, just reading, okay? When you come to selective attention, it's actually for you to read the color of the ink. So that would be red here instead of the word black. You would say red, black, blue, yellow, green, blue, because you're reading the color, not the word, yellow and black. Okay. And you would continue throughout. Divided attention, you would task back and forth. So that would be where you're reading the color of the ink here and then the word. So the color of the ink is red and then the word is red. So you would be red, red, green, yellow. And see, that's a little more difficult because then you have to remember if you're on the color of the ink or you're reading the word. And so that's more problematic. So I bet some of you are going, hold on a minute, that is incredibly hard for me to do. And that's because many of us suffer with attention issues on a day-to-day basis. So fun screenshot for you there. And again, this PowerPoint will be given to Families Helping Families so you can use this at home. All right. We have several more skills to cover, so I'm going to keep moving forward. And then again, we will have Q&A at the end. So if you have other questions about this, please put them in the chat and we will get to your questions. The next one, the one that I told you, I really feel like is one of our primary skills and we want to see this happening. This is the skill I hear the most about as a professional because I hear all the time, my child just needs more time. My child cannot keep up in the classroom. We just need to get a 504 or an SBLC or an IEP so that we can get them more time, okay? Well, processing speed does actually measure how much time we need to do something. So we measure this through a test. It affects us on time test. It affects us on homework. It affects us in completing tasks in our everyday life, but it also affects us understanding information at a quick speed, and it affects our overall performance of our brain. So it's a very, very important skill, and it's important that we keep it refined no matter how old that we are, okay? When we test it, the skill is tested by finding two objects that are the same very quickly. So obviously the star and the star, the asterisk and the asterisk here. And when we test it for older people, it's tested by numbers, objects, or letters. And you might hear this called rapid automatic naming, okay? And that's the procedure or the RAND procedure that you might hear. So how can you work on this at home to make it more efficient? Your child's struggling, you are. What could you do with this? If you have a simple deck of cards that you could get at the dollar store, you could start with just a card sort by red and black, sorting by sets, just card sorts, and trying to get the time more efficiently done for that. You can do any timed game or activity would increase that. Everything from folding clothes, doing laundry, taking the trash out. You can make the chores into a processing speed exercise or a game that will benefit your child on their homework and their schoolwork. And that's really the incredible part of this. I mentioned before that the 5-second rule was one of my favorite games for this. They do have a version's 5-second rule for adults and older children, 12 and above. They do also have one for, it's called the 5-second rule junior. And that one is fun. It's going to be like, you know, in 5 seconds, you name 3 Barbies or 3 Disney princesses or something like that. Whereas the adult version might say, name 3 cars that are driven in standard only. So it's a little more challenging in the adult version. So just be aware of that. This primary processing speed and speeding up the brain has to do with categorizing and recall fluency. So again, rapid object naming is the best way that you can do this. You can use the rapid object naming using spelling words, math facts. These are the things that it affects a lot in your home life, okay? And being able to stay on task with those things. I'm going to breathe for a minute and let you do another brain dump because I've dumped a lot of information on you. So take just a minute and do a little brain dump. And while you're doing that, I'm going to share a tool. These are actually 2 tools that I use. Hopefully you can see these really well. This is a brain dump pad. It's available at the $5 and under store. Both of these are available there, or Amazon, or different places you can get them. But they're just brain dump books. This is a classic pad. This is a whole book. This one is more geared to an adult, and this can be geared to either or, children or adult. There's lots of little pads like this, but they basically give you dumping grounds so that you can take concepts when you're taking new information in, and you can categorize it easily in that dumping ground. And then you can put everything down and then go through it and pull out what's necessary for you to remember, and then dump the rest that's not necessary. So that's critical for that working memory into that long-term memory. All right. Let's talk about logic and reasoning. Logic and reasoning is higher thinking skills. It is our problem-solving ability, and it is critical, what we call a hot skill, a higher order thinking skill. It is a singular test for IQ and Tony, so you can do that test where you can just get what's called pure IQ just by looking at a singular test. And examples of logic and reasoning are things that you can see, such as creating solutions, maybe creative solutions to problems, and you can definitely see it in math word problems. One area that we measure it is by letting you puzzle it out. You may have seen this on some IQ tests where you're looking at what is the 3 here and what is the one that belongs here. This is the simplistic version, and it gets more complicated as you go through the test. So areas that you can do for logic exercises. My favorite for young kids is Connect 4. It's a great game for as they get a little bit older. Obviously, you can move into checkers and chess. But I will say the one that helps kids the most to see big change once they're reading and you're working on that is actually working on logic puzzles. And those logic puzzles are available in printables at these 2 links here. And I also have them available where you can purchase them at mindware.com. My favorite at mindware.com is either Logic Links, which is a game with small manipulatives that you can use, or there is another one there called Perplexers, which is a writable pad workbook, and it's fabulous. Something that I use on a regular basis to get big change in comprehension for students in logic and in mathematical issues, okay? All right, because I'm trying to stay on pace, I'm going to move on to our visual processing. Remember that visual processing is not how well your eyes see, but really how your brain processes what you see. There's a lot of tricks of the trade that your eyes can be tricked, your brain can be tricked through visualization, but visualization is something that you use for sports, plays, dance routines. We use it for maps and graphs. We use it for comprehension. We use it for art. We use it for what we do, our visual spatial sketch pad. So an activity for you to try this and see if your visual processor is working is spell Shreveport backwards. Let me give you a second. So how fast did you go? TROP, EVE, RHS. Okay. So this is needed for subjects like math, geography, science, and history. And one of the primary ways that you can see this is avoidance of puzzles. So if a student avoids puzzles or a child avoids puzzles, or you haven't spent time playing puzzles, this is actually how this skill is assessed and how you can tell whether a child struggles or an adult struggles with these skills. So in the testing itself, it is test by puzzling. So you would look at the test and you would say, where does this piece belong? And it should be here. So you would find that piece highlighted, you would click on this piece. Okay, that is one way it's assessed. Visual processing exercises you can do at home. My favorite, I think, is I Spy, or what I call 20 questions. So I Spy is just like we used to play in the car. I spy with my little eye something that's blue, okay? And everybody guesses what it is. And then that's fun because your brain has to look around and think, right? 20 questions is a little bit different. It's something like I would do with my kids when they were little, and even when I was a teacher in the classroom. I would put what I had a mystery envelope. So just a regular envelope, put something in the envelope. That's a treat maybe for the kids, and say, you get 20 questions. And if you can figure out what this is, then you get whatever treat is in this envelope. Okay. So it just keeps their mind going. You can use it as a discipline thing where when they have had a really good day, then you can say, okay, you can ask a 20 question. You can ask one of your 20 questions today because you've had a really good day. Or if you're needing to keep it more immediate, you can say, you can ask me a question, every 2 hours that you've stayed on task, or every day you come home on green from school, or whatever it is right there. Remember, this is focusing on their mental mind movie. So it's really helping them to increase this. Surprisingly, this is one of the areas that we are seeing the most fallback from students, because television technology has created this quick ability for them to get that information very quickly. The other side of that is the auditory processing, and this is not how well you hear necessarily, but how you process what you hear. And this skill happens a lot. After COVID, we saw a lot of weaknesses in this area, and it is the #1 skill needed for reading and spelling. It affects oral comprehension, learning of foreign languages, and it is necessary for us in reading, language arts, pronunciation, and it can affect our writing. So an activity that you could try, let's say prelf without the f. If you said prel, you were correct, okay? Let's say melfriendsind without the n, melfriendsid. So you would drop the n and it would have sid on the end, okay? If you had trouble even reading that nonsense word, that's a key that your auditory processing may be weak, okay? So auditory processing is the skill that we use for reading, and it is the necessary skill, and it is assessed by using nonsense language and dropping sounds and adding sounds. And that's the reason why you hear a lot about the test at school that's DIBELS, because it uses the nonsense language when they're assessing. And the DIBELS test came from the state of Iowa. So that is one of those tests that came out of a university setting. We use also the nonsense language to assess the word attackability through a nonsense reading test. And that would be reading words like this, like frond, plelsk, relt, frensential, okay? So understanding how to put the codes of the English language together to say that, okay? This is a decoding skill. It's required for reading and comprehension, and we follow word patterns. So you might have looked at this word and you saw the front from the word front, and then you added a D instead of a T. You might have looked at this one and said, well, I know play, and then added the sk sound there. You might have understood that the WR together only has an R sound, and then you saw the alt and put it together. And again, frensential, it's understanding that when you're reading that word, that TIAL comes together and makes a different sound than we would typically do. And that's word attack. All right, so what do we do about these weaknesses? Now we know we've got a little idea of what that is. So the first thing that you want to make sure that you do is you want to be deliberate on knowing where your skill set is, as this affects you in every walk of life, okay? So this could be the young child who is just not getting reading because they're about 4 years old and everybody else seems to, or they're a late speaker, they had a lot of ear infections, they had some speech delays, things like that. It could be an older student who didn't seem to struggle and now all of a sudden is struggling with reading, with comprehension. And it can even happen after a traumatic brain injury, cancer, dementia, early onset of memory issues. So it can happen through all walks of life where you can have different weaknesses that happen. So the first thing to do, again, is be deliberate on knowing where your skill set, and that's by getting that yearly assessment. I think probably most of us who are on this know that we need to go and take our regular checkup with our doctor. Probably most of us go to a dentist, an eye doctor to get checked out. Well, the cognitive testing checks out how your brain is functioning. So know your cognitive weaknesses and understanding what they are can help you to have a better life skill set throughout your life. It can measure your gains and losses, just like getting your blood pressure or your weight or your temperature checked. It can tell you when something is wrong, obviously, but it can also see if you're staying on par with where you should be. Okay. So getting that assessment is really important, being deliberate about knowing where your skill set is, but also being purposeful on your interventions. So just as we went through some of those skills, I can guarantee you that you looked and they're like, oh, that was tough. So whether that was attention or whether that was the auditory processing. So be deliberate about addressing that. You can partner with someone like us that does the one-to-one brain training. You can do online digital interventions. You can do games like we talked about. And we do have a game pack if you're interested that does help you to have an idea of games that you could play. But be purposeful. If you're struggling with memory, work on memory. If you're struggling with processing, work on processing. Be deliberate about how you go about those things, okay? And just a reminder that the digital age is 10 minutes times the age of your child, and no media 1 hour before bed. Audiobooks or oral reading with your child needs to be done daily. And if you're not doing these things, you are training their brain. You're just not training it forward, you're training it backward. So you might take this moment and say, I know how I can make some changes now to my lifestyle and what we're doing so that we can make things a little more efficient for our family. Okay. All right. I think we're kind of at an end there. Monica, I will give the rest of the time so we can do a Q&A as requested.
Okay, so we'll wait just a second. If anybody has any questions, they can type it into the chat. I know sometimes it takes me a while to get my and also you can make sure you can put it on host and panelists, okay, or you can put it on everyone when you're typing a question.
Okay. I'm going to stop the share for a minute so I can answer any questions that anyone has. So
I'll kind of ask a question right now.
Sure.
Where are you located?
It's a really great question.
Yeah.
So the main location is at 8856 Urey Drive. We're the only one associated in the state. So we're the only brain training organization in the not in the United States, in Louisiana. We are the #1 in the nation, but we also deliver cognitive training virtually. So you can be, no matter where you are. I have students in Dubai and I have students in Minnesota. So it doesn't really matter where you are. You can do brain training virtually, one-to-one through Zoom, just like we're doing now. Okay.
And there is a question, it says, how expensive is to have yearly cognitive assessments? And I'm gonna
So,
add on to that, is yearly cognitive assessments necessary?
okay, so let's answer both of those. I do believe that yearly cognitive assessment is very, very important. There are some stipulations to that. For example, the Woodcock-Johnson likes you to have it like every 3 years. The Gibson test that we do digitally, we say have it every year. The reason why is because you want to monitor yourself year over year. You really do want to see that change is happening. And I think that is important because if change is happening, you can see which direction is happening. And in a world that changes so much, I think that is very important. As far as the expense, the initial assessment here is $299 for a Woodcock-Johnson. It is $199 for you to have the Gibson test. And that's, like I said, that's a minimal expense for your yearly. That does include the assessment and it does include a plan time. So in other words, you get to sit down with me for an hour and to go over what areas you need to work on. So you also get that free educational consult included with that cognitive assessment. And that is really invaluable for you because we set you up with a plan that you can go forward and, you know, do some things there.
Okay, that's good to know. There's another question. What is the typical IQ score improvement with a child that has autism, particularly one that has an intellectual disability as well?
Okay, so as stated, and I think that this person realizes that there is no quick fix. There's no such thing as quick fix to any disability, but brain training is significantly beneficial. I'm going to direct you to look specifically at a website that is the LearningRx research, because LearningRx does have research on autism specifically and on children with intellectual disabilities. You can actually look at your child's age range and see what that change is. Our average change for a child in IQ is 21 points, and that does include those children who have autism. And so they are not relegated or, you know, set out separately, but there is actual data and information on that if you want to look at specific learning disabilities in our research report. It's and it's very easy to get to. I can put that link in here, but it's very easy just to do LearningRx research results report. And the latest version is 2024. And you can get to that super easy just by Googling it. And it will show you where you can dive in there and look in detail about specifically just for autism, autism with intellectual disability, dyslexia, ADHD, traumatic brain injury. You can even look at it by the age group of the child. And so since that's kind of a specific question, I think I would definitely look at the research for that in the average game. But again, typical IQ boost across the board for all of our students is around 21 points. And we have a lot of autistic children that are very successful and get that or more. So.
Okay, there's another question. Is the cost of testing covered by private insurance or state insurance programs?
Yes and no. Okay. So there's a hard line on this one. Medicaid right now is not really doing a great job about covering the cost. Some private insurances do, like HSAs definitely are covering it. Some parents can file for reimbursement. We do not bill insurance directly. We will help you file for reimbursement, both for the testing and for the intervention that we do here in the one-to-one. So we help you with doing that. I really have, I will say, probably about 30% of my clients that get reimbursement. The majority of my clients choose to take it off as an unreimbursed healthcare on their income taxes, because generally that's more beneficial. Most parents don't even realize you can do that, but you can. So there are some state programs that do cover the cost of the assessment, but again, the cost is pretty minimal. When it comes down to it, it's in today's rule of thumb, I guess it's really about a cost of a meal or two out. for a family. So it's unfortunate that things have gotten so expensive, but we can get that cost down. And there, just for attending this webinar, we did offer a discount also for anyone who attended the webinar of $100 off the assessment. So, which that's significant. So you can either get the Gibson testing for $99, or you can get the Woodcock Johnson for $199. Just be sure that you told them you attended the webinar.
That's awesome. What about, you know, because I know sometimes people say that they, or some of the physicians are, they will say, you know, we recommend this educational, evaluation.
As medically necessary.
Yeah. So does that change anything with reimbursement or?
You know, it used to be that this was highly reimbursed a few years ago, but I will say in 2018, things like dyslexia and other resources were taken out of the DSM, so they're not really covered by insurance anymore. And that is frustrating for a lot of parents and a lot of, you know, different entities. Ours included. We would love for insurance to cover costs like this. I mean, it's why we pay for insurance, right? As individuals. The reality is that they see educational cost as not being something to do with health. I disagree completely because it's the brain. But it's easier for them to see, you know, a medication like a pharmaceutical being covered than it is for them to see something like interventional. Now, the exception to that is in the state of Louisiana, interventions for autism have to be covered if it is a state-based insurance company. So that depends on your insurance. We've had some success with military like TRICARE. We've had some success with you know, Blue Cross Blue Shield and, you know, some of the different insurance companies like that, but it's a case-by-case basis. So you would just need to inquire with your insurance company and say, hey, do you cover this? Now, we also have had some students who have been on Medicaid and they had different waivers, like a Katie waiver or a NOW waiver, something like that, and their costs were covered. So it really is on a, you know, a case-by-case basis.
I don't see any more questions.
Well, I hope you got a lot of information. Remember, our goal here is really to make learning fun. Learning should be fun for everyone. It doesn't matter how old that you are, learning should be fun. And that's what our goal is to make learning fun. If I could leave you with any one thing for you to know, it's this. Whenever you play any type of learning and you play at that type of learning, it takes 2 times to learn something. Whereas if you do it in rote memorization, it takes 10 times. So just think about that. If you could play at categorizing instead of having to do it by rote memorization, then you're going to learn it much quicker. If you can play a memory game versus just doing that, if you can play with those spelling words and those math facts, you're going to increase the ability of the brain to grasp it much more quickly, much more quickly.
Okay. That's very interesting. And that's what, as far as early steps and early intervention,
Right.
you know, that's kind of what they base their interventions on, is that children learn better through their normal routines and through play.
That's right.
So that's considered
Right.
best practice. Oh, here's another question. And I just put a link in the chat, and this is for our survey. So if you need a certificate for participating today, then when you fill out the survey, that's the only way you can get a certificate, is if you fill out the survey. So you can go ahead and click on it now and open that link, or it should come up whenever we end the in this session. It may pop up in the Zoom window. Sometimes if you're on your phone, it may not do that. And then also it should send an email within a day or two. So there's other ways. If you're not able to access this link right now to fill out the survey to get a certificate, then there are other ways to do it. But I did put it in the chat, so you can go ahead and click on this. If you need a certificate, then in this survey section, and after you do the survey, it says there's a comment section there. You need to put your name, like put your full name. What name do you want on the certificate? and then your email address. What email address do you want us to send the certificate to? We need those two things, and just put, I need a certificate, please, or a certificate. And we'll get you a certificate for your participation today. So so that's link is in the chat. We have to have the survey to be able to give a certificate. We want you to do the survey whether you need a certificate or not. You know, there's that comment section. You can put, you know, are there some other workshops or other topics you would like to see? So, and we will get the slides sent out because that was a question. But let me get back to another question we had here was, how do you determine what level to use when you are oral reading to your child?
So there's a really great way to determine that. One, always read above your child's grade level. Okay, so everybody's like, wait, what a minute? That's exactly right. Because you increase vocabulary and you grow up. Not only that, you show them how readers attack that. So when you're reading to a child, and in a beginning child who's not reading at all, you're already reading above their grade level, right? So if they're in first grade, read a second or third grade book to them, because it's going to have a higher vocabulary and it's going to encourage them to do it. You can read their books with them also, but if you will read above their level, then you're going to be increasing their vocabulary, and you're going to be showing them how good readers perform and attack things that they don't know. The other thing I would suggest to you is, don't really focus so much on the level that you're reading at as the fact that you're enjoying the experience. Because when you're interacting with the book, you are showing what the whole purpose of the book is. You're interacting with the book. So when you're having fun with it, even if it's a picture book and you're interacting with the book and pointing out the pictures and showing the child all these different things, you're showing them what a book is supposed to do. You're showing them what the reading experience is and that it's transactional. So reading is a transactional experience. It has so many different pieces and layers that come along with that. But reading itself is a transactional experience. You are interacting to what the author is saying, and you're getting something out of it. And every single person who reads gets a different experience. I would say if all of us here read the exact same book, we would have different takeaways from that book, or that different thing that we looked at. And the importance of that's the reason why lots of book clubs meet to talk about their experience in the book, is because that's it. So think of it, your interaction when you're reading with your child, more of a book club type thing. We are both getting something out of this experience. Okay. I mean, I can go to, my husband and I were talking the other day about a simple children's book that was my son's favorite. My son's graduating the State Trooper Academy. And he was like, this was his favorite book when he was little. And he said, you know, it's really about this. And I was like, no, I never got that out of that book. Never, ever got that out of that book when I was reading that book. I literally just enjoyed it as an experience of, you know, a mom and, you know, thinking about a loving experience. And he's like, no, there's an undertow to that. And it's about this. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I'm talking about. It's an interactional experience. And that's what you should be doing when you read, is reading. And if I can encourage you to do anything when you're reading aloud, stop. Interact out loud with the book while you're reading. Say what you're thinking, because then the children understand that you are interacting with the text and your takeaway. And why this is important: you're building your child's schema. Okay. So schema means just filing cabinet of the brain. Okay. So when you're interacting with the text, if I'm working with a child and I'm reading about something about an escalator, I have no idea if your child's interacted with an escalator before and knows what an escalator is, but you do. And so you could say, oh, escalator, you know, that's like those moving stairs at the airport when we were there and you loved going up and down. Well, you know that because you can trigger your child's schema, and that gives them meaning to that vocabulary when they see it. Okay. So that's the purpose of that interactional experience.
There's another question here. It's a good one.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on working with a child that sees learning as a threat and puts them into fight or flight?
That's where the majority of the children that we work with absolutely start right there. That's the reality. So where do you start with them? Well, first, you need to know where their learning skills are. What is it that's causing the fight or flight? Okay. Is it because it's a memory issue? Is it because it's a processing issue? So once you know what's causing the fight, flight, or freeze that happens with the child, then you can start playing in that area so it is not as threatening. So again, knowing what the skill is and then playing in that area can make it more fun. For example, a child who struggles with visual processing may not be creating good mental picture, but if you were playing a puzzle with them, may engage with that. They may hate puzzles and you can do Legos with them. There's so many different tools now that are available to us. And that again is why it's worthy to get an assessment and then sit down and let's talk that out and see what are the threats? What does that look like? What are the ways that we can get around this process of fight, flight, or freeze for that child?
Just kind of waiting to see if there's any more. I don't,
Sure.
the minute we start going somewhere else, it looks
Right.
like we do have somebody.
Good job with the question.
I'm going to get, Jamaica has raised her hand. I'm gonna see if, because we don't have that many people on here, so I'm gonna go ahead and allow her to talk
Sure,
if she can ask the question.
sure.
Jamaica, you can unmute it if you need to.
What do you do if your child is 7 years old? She has a hard time remembering, and she's told her teacher what the problem is. She can't remember her spelling words, and instead of the teacher understanding, she says, well, you need to spend more time learning your spelling words. And every night when she comes home from school, we spend about 45 minutes going over just spelling words, and she's still not remembering. We have tried with pictures, flashcards. I've tried playing the game of tic-tac-toe where she writes the word and then she'll make a sentence out of the word, but it's like she completely shuts down. What do I do then?
Well, probably what it sounds like is that your child is struggling with some memory activities and it may be the visual spatial sketchpad. So a quick check on that would be if she knows how to spell her name forward, ask her to spell her name backward and see if she looks up and to the left to do so. So again, challenge yourself to do that. A child who's using their visual processor will look up and to the left when they're trying to access their visual processor. And if they're not looking up and to the left, that means they're not accessing their visual processor. And so she's probably having a hard time. The reason why this is important is because this is our cheat sheet. So when we study our spelling words and we put them on our cheat sheet and then we go to school, we can pull this cheat sheet out while we're at school. And that can alleviate that whole threat. So she needs to play with the words on the cheat sheet so she knows. So I'm just going to use a word. So we use the word baby, okay? So first we have her air write the word baby, okay? So I'm going to write it backwards. So it's a B and then A and then B and then Y, okay? So when you've written the word baby across, and you're going to say, I want you to touch or punch the two B's, okay? So I see the two B's and I recognize those two B's. So you're playing with the sounds that you're doing that and helping her understand the sounds in the language and how that goes. And then she's actually doing that kinesthetic connect, okay? So that she gets that. That actually helps trigger that visual processor so that she can actually do that. So you're doing it kinesthetically, you're doing it visually, and you're integrating it when she writes it, okay? But again, it sounds like you need an assessment to see if it's a working memory issue, a retrieval issue, a visual processing issue. There's so many different things that can be affecting that. On the side of the teacher and what you're saying, understand the teacher is expecting that if they've studied, then they're able to do this, just like the teacher is expecting if the child comes to the classroom, the child can see. If the child comes to the classroom, the child can hear, okay? They are not trained nor taught as teachers to identify nor to remediate cognitive processes. That's not their job. I was a teacher for over 20 years. I was a reading specialist, actually, with 2 master's degrees. I was a principal. I was never taught to identify weak cognitive skills nor to remediate those skills. And so this is something that is not in the teaching world. It's not their fault. It is not what they're taught to do. This is something just like a vision or hearing issue. You need to identify what is causing the problem and then look at what possible things. And then you can go to the school informed and you can say, this is where my child is struggling. And these are the things that you could do to help my child be more successful in the classroom. And these are the things we're doing at home to make our child be more successful. So creating a partnership rather than saying the teacher's not just understanding what my child's going through. My child is super frustrated. Getting that assessment is a game changer, guaranteed.
What do you do when you try to get the assessment done and it falls on deaf ears? I've requested an SBLC meeting last year as well as this year, and it falls on deaf ears. I have brought documentation from an independent assessment done at Ochsner, and they said that they still have to do their own assessment.
So that actually is where Families Helping Families does step in. That is one of the things that they do, is they do, as well as Teams LA. They both will go with you to help you in navigating some of the things in the school setting. If you do have formal diagnosis and you do know what is causing the weakness and you've requested a 504 or SBLC, an IEP, an IAP, and you're not getting any traction on that, then I would refer you back out to Families Helping Families and to Teams LA if you can't. The typical response of we don't accept outside evals is normal. They have 10 days to do something about that by law. There are some strictures that are there. They have to have a meeting with you if you bring that outside eval in, and then they have to have a timeline for them to do their own evaluation or accept the outside evaluation. So just know that there are laws and you do have rights for that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Absolutely. I can't hear you, Monica. I think you're on mute.
I'm muted. There we go. So yeah, you said if you go ahead and if you could just send the PowerPoint to us.
Sure, absolutely.
And we'll get it sent out to people. I think, is there another? Oh, there was a comment. That's a typical Caddo response. They like to say they don't accept outside evals. Yeah. But don't most school systems use that Woodcock-Johnson also though?
Yes and no. They use portions of the Woodcock-Johnson. Most of the time they lean into the Woodcock-Johnson achievement, and they may do a Wiscar or Wechsler. It just really depends on the type of testing that they do. So if the child has had a thorough assessment, as in Jamaica's case, that you've had a thorough assessment and they're refusing to accept outside eval, there actually is a timeline that they actually have to abide by law. They have to either do their own evaluation or accept the outside evaluation within a certain timeline. So you need to know your rights. There is a Bulletin 1508 that does give you those rights. And you can go on the Louisiana Believes website and pull that up and know your rights in regards to that. But again, I would refer you back to the people at Families Helping Families or at teamsla.org. They actually have people that do that in a nonprofit status to help you and assist you with walking through those holes. If your evaluation is old, if it's older than probably 3 years, they're not going to accept it. So you're going to need to do an updated evaluation. And I would encourage you to do that. Updated evaluation, because that can be a game changer for you. And again, just remember, when you have weaknesses and you have things that are going on, the school's role is to accommodate or help with that in the best way that they can possible, but they cannot make change to that. They can only water it down by, doing that. They can accommodate it. They can modify some of the curriculum, but they cannot make change to the brain because that is not their role to do it. No more than it's their role to make your child have a hearing change or a vision change or any type of, they can only accommodate. So realize that and know that change can be made if you are deliberate about addressing the weak cognitive skills. That's what neuroplasticity is. That's what changing the brain is all about.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anything else coming up. So
Well,
we will
thank
get
you
those
guys
out.
for
Click on
attending.
the,
I appreciate it.
I'm gonna click on the link. I'm gonna paste this one more time, just so it'll be right there handy for anybody that might want to click on it if they need a certificate, or if you want to just make a comment. And please fill out the survey anyways. We like to have that feedback. But thank you so much. I appreciate your time today, and we'll get the PowerPoint sent out when we get them.
I will get them over to you immediately.
All right. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
Bye-bye.